The mechanic pushed through the heavy, wind-cutting snow, each step sinking into the white drifts as if the earth itself wanted to keep him from moving forward. His fingers were numb despite the thick gloves, and his breath formed clouds that instantly froze on the edge of his scarf. The small box inside his jacket felt like a fragile ember he had to protect from the storm. It was just a toy, an ordinary stuffed reindeer with a red nose, but for the little girl waiting in the cabin at the edge of town, it meant everything. He hadn't planned to be out on a night like this. He had just finished repairing an old truck in his garage when the girl's grandmother had rushed in, shivering, her voice cracking with worry. She told him that her granddaughter had been crying for hours, clutching an empty stocking, asking over and over if the toy her late father used to promise her would ever come. The grandmother had tried everything to comfort her, but nothing worked. When she mentioned the toy store closing early because of the storm, the mechanic didn't think twice. He grabbed his keys, drove through roads where even plows refused to go, and somehow found the last toy reindeer on the shelf. Now he was walking the final mile on foot because his truck had gotten stuck near the cliffs. The wind slapped against his face with freezing cruelty, but what kept him going was the memory of the girl's eyes, wide, hollow, searching for a bit of magic in a world that had recently taken too much from her. He trudged forward, guided by the faint light coming from the cabin in the distance, glowing like a small, warm lantern in a world swallowed by winter. The storm raged harder, swirling around him like a living thing determined to turn him back. His legs ached, but he refused to stop. This wasn't just about a toy anymore. It was about hope, about bringing a smile to a child who clearly had too few of them left. When he finally reached the cabin door, snow had piled on his shoulders like he carried a small mountain. He knocked weakly, half dizzy from exhaustion. The grandmother opened the door, her face lighting up when she saw him standing there soaked and frozen but holding the small, wrapped package. She didn't say a word, her eyes spoke all the gratitude she couldn't express. She hurried him inside. Warmth washed over him instantly, making his skin sting as it thawed. The little girl sat by the fireplace, wrapped in a quilt, her cheeks streaked from earlier tears. She lifted her head when she heard footsteps. The mechanic knelt beside her and gently placed the toy in her lap. For a moment, she simply stared at it, her lips trembling. Then she threw her arms around him with surprising strength for such a small child. He felt her tiny hands on his back, and something inside him shifted, something soft, something painfully human. "You brought him," she whispered, her voice muffled against his shoulder. He didn't trust himself to speak, so he nodded instead. The grandmother wiped her eyes discreetly, then motioned for him to sit by the fire and warm up. She served him hot soup and insisted he stay until the storm eased. He didn't argue. His body felt like it had turned into stone, and the warmth of the cabin soothed him in ways he didn't expect. As he sipped the soup, the girl played with the toy reindeer, introducing it to the shadows on the wooden floor, giggling softly. The mechanic couldn't help but smile. He hadn't seen her smile earlier, and it made everything, every freezing step, every risk, worth it. But he had no idea who the girl's mother was. Hours passed, and the storm outside began to calm. The wind softened, the snow slowed, and the world outside the window shifted from violent white to peaceful stillness. The grandmother thanked him, again and again, insisting she would pay him for the trouble. He shook his head each time. This wasn't something money could measure. He was preparing to leave when headlights suddenly cut through the fading storm, sliding across the snowy yard. A sleek black SUV pulled up, the kind that didn't belong in a small, struggling town like theirs. The engine turned off, and the driver's door opened. A tall woman stepped out, wrapped in a long coat, her hair pinned back neatly despite the rough weather. She walked with purpose, as if she carried the weight of entire companies on her shoulders. Her expression was sharp but tired, the kind of tired that didn't come from lack of sleep but from carrying responsibilities too heavy for one person. The grandmother stiffened when she saw her. "She's home," she murmured, her tone a strange mix of relief and tension. The mechanic didn't understand until the little girl rushed to the door, calling out, "Mom." The woman's entire face softened instantly. She bent down, hugging her daughter with a tenderness that didn't match her powerful presence. The mechanic looked away out of courtesy, but the scene warmed him as much as the fire had. "I came as fast as I could," the mother whispered to the girl. I'm sorry I had to leave so suddenly. The grandmother cleared her throat and gestured toward the mechanic. He's the one who brought her the toy she's been crying about. The woman straightened, turning to face him. Her eyes swept over him, his worn jacket, snow-streaked boots, rough hands still red from the cold. Something flickered in her gaze, something like surprise, curiosity, maybe even respect. You walked through this storm, just to bring a toy? She asked quietly. He shrugged awkwardly. She needed it. For a moment, she didn't speak. She simply studied him, as if trying to understand a person who would do something so selfless without expecting anything in return. Then she said, I owe you a thank you. You don't owe me anything, he replied softly. But she seemed unconvinced. She stepped closer, extending her hand. I'm Elena Stoyanova. I'm the new CEO of Northline Industries. I came back tonight because something urgent happened at headquarters. The mechanic blinked, taken aback. He had heard about the company, a huge corporation that owned several factories in the region. People talked about the new CEO, how young she was, how decisive, how she came from a different world than their small town. He shook her hand. I'm Mark, just a mechanic, not just anything, she corrected gently. Her daughter tugged on her coat, showing her the reindeer. Mom, look, he found him for me. The CEO's eyes softened again. She touched the toy and smiled faintly. Your father used to promise you this one, she murmured. She looked at Mark. You didn't just bring her a toy. You brought back a piece of her father. He felt a lump in his throat but said nothing. He wasn't used to being the center of this kind of attention. The grandmother suggested everyone sit and warm up. Elena reluctantly agreed, brushing snow off her coat. She settled beside her daughter, but her gaze kept drifting to Mark, studying him quietly, as if piecing together a man who would brave a deadly storm for a child he barely knew. As they talked, he learned that Elena had grown up in the same town but left for university and never looked back until her husband died, leaving her widowed with a daughter and a company she never expected to run. The weight of her life hung between her words even when she didn't say them. He didn't tell her much about himself, just that he ran the only auto shop in town and that winters here were always rougher on foot than on wheels. But she listened to every word, her attention surprising him. Before she left, she approached him at the door. The storm had stopped, and moonlight spilled across the snow in silver sheets. I meant what I said, she told him softly. You did more tonight than most people would. He shrugged again, uncomfortable with praise. It was nothing. It wasn't nothing to my daughter, she said. Or to me. She hesitated, then added, you may not realize it yet, but tonight changed something. He didn't know what she meant. But he would soon. Because in the days to come, their worlds, one of grease-stained workbenches and one of glass-walled boardrooms, would collide in ways neither of them could have expected. And it would all begin with a toy reindeer delivered in a storm.